Right. Okay. We are starting, right? Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining into for today's webinar. Firstly, if anyone is facing any kind of issues with the audio video, just put a message on the chat box and we'll resolve that, right? So in today's webinar, we are going to talk about Kaveri Seeds, which is one of the leading. Just a second. Is the voice proper? Right. Okay. One of the participants was right. So in today's webinar, we'll be covering Kaveri Seeds, which is one of the leading hybrid seeds company with market leadership along multiple crop segment. Right. This webinar is a part of our knowledge-based initiative, wherein we try to cover additional stock ideas, which are not part of our recommendation as yet. Right. Instead of putting up a blog post this time, we are doing it as a webinar to make it more interactive. At the same time, we are being joined by uh, additional participants who are not members of Surge as of yet, right? So before we begin, just a standard disclaimer: I'm a SEBI registered investment research analyst, right? Whatever this webinar is only for knowledge share purpose, and nothing what we said is a recommendation. Our recommendation is solely on the stock ideas that is visible on the dashboard, right? Some additional disclosure on the SEBI's research analyst. I'll just pause a minute for everyone to be able to read this. Right. So the flow of the webinar would be such, right? Very briefly, we'll try to cover what is a hybrid seed and what is genetically modified hybrids. This is to ensure that there's a clear base. Just a second. Mr. Ashwin, I think you should try and reconnect. Everyone else is having clear with the voice. Right. So, yeah. So we'll start with the hybrid, right? Just to get an understanding of what it means and how it works. Then we'll shift to understanding the dynamics of how a hybrid seeds business works, right? And this is would be from the investor's perspective. There would be a couple of things that we would be covering over here in terms of how hybrid seed is developed in terms of R&D, how the commercial production happens, how the sales and marketing happens, and then we'll also understand what the key dynamic of a seed business, right, which is very important for us as an investor to understand and which determines one of the key aspect of what interests us here, right? Then we'll talk about Kaveri Seeds and see how all these dynamics have played out for Kaveri in the past, right? Then we'll talk about at the moment how Kaveri is placed and what are the interesting aspects over here. And then we'll talk about some of the things because of which we have not recommended Kaveri Seeds yet, even though we are there's quite a lot of interesting opportunities over here, right? So firstly, on the hybrid seeds, right? So typically the way seeds are grown, like it occurs naturally, right? So every plant, there's something called open pollination, right? So the pollen from male plant goes into a female plant either through insects, wind, or whatever, and then you get a fruit which has the seed. So this is a naturally occurring phenomenon. What differentiates hybrids is that in hybrids, what happens is you have two different varieties of same plants. For example, for tomato, you have two different varieties, and that pollination happens between two different varieties, such that the resultant sorry for that. I think we lost the connection somewhere. Right. So sorry for that. I think there's some issue with connection. Right. Okay. Okay. Right. So like I was speaking, so in hybrids, you have two different varieties of seeds which get pollinated. Either naturally also sometimes the hybrid are grown, right? Because you might have two different varieties of plants growing in the same direction, and then it pollinates. But typically, what happens is hybrid seeds are, the hybrids are mated in a regulated setting, right? So that it is done intentionally, right, by different companies, so that to try if X variety of a plant is mated with a different variety of plant, what kind of results you get. So the thought idea here is to ensure that, to achieve different characteristics of different hybrids to result in a hybrid which has some better characteristics. For example, in the example on the right, so two different varieties of tomatoes are breeded to get a variety which, has less sugar, more color attractive, and also better color and shape, right? At the same time, then we have what is called a GMO, which is genetically modified hybrid. In a GMO, what happens is basically, some of the characteristics which cannot occur in a plant naturally are inserted in the plant's tissue in a lab setting, right? So you take a genetic material which is inserted in the plant tissue, and the plant that grows becomes a genetic modified plant. And using that plant, you again create a hybrid which becomes a genetically modified hybrid. So herein you will have two traits. So first is the gene that you did in the lab itself, and then whatever characteristics are that the plant will acquire naturally by mating between two different varieties of plants, right? Now coming to the dynamics of seed business. So first thing that one needs to understand before understanding anything out here is that seeds are biological products, right? These are not manufactured products, but these are something that are grown in fields. So there are a lot of things outside of human control, right? So it's not, that you take X raw material, you add Y raw material and get Z manufactured product in a day or in a week or a month, right? That does not work. So that is the key concept that one needs to understand, that seeds are biological products, right? And they have to grow naturally. It takes a lot of time to grow, right? And the end result might vary a lot, right? So this one of the examples that you can understand over here is, in pharma, there are small molecules in the biologics, right? So small molecules are chemical entities. When you put X chemical, Y chemical, you react it, you get Z, right? But biologics are different because, that is why a lot of people can't replicate biologics, and they have to call biosimilars because they are biological products. You can't just replicate it as such, right? So the R&D process is something that you need to understand first. So the typical R&D process in developing a new hybrid is more of a trial and error process, right? So what companies do is they'll try different permutation combinations of various different varieties of plants, right, to see the results as to if the hybrid that is resulting of this combination is giving the desired result, and that too over consistent period, right? So one of won't work. I mean, a lot of times naturally you might get a certain result, but for that to be a commercial product, you want that the result should be recurring every time. So it's more of a permutation combination wherein a company will try, thousands of permutation combinations till the time they get a hybrid, right, between combination of say X and Y variety that is giving the desired results, right? And this entire development process takes like 5, 7, 8 years. The reason being that each time for a hybrid to grow, it takes one full season, which is typically 1 year. So for in first, if a company tries to create a hybrid with plant variety X and then plant variety Y, right? Once that hybrid grows, then you'll get the fruit, and with that fruit seeds you'll plant, and then you will record the results next year, that this is how this plant is grown, this is what the yield is, and this is what the results are. So this entire step test one permutation combination is like a 2-year process, right? And even when you have a successful hybrid, the thing is that you cannot say that this product will work in every geography, because different geographies, different states have different soil characteristics, different climatic conditions. So a successful product might not work across the geographies. At the same time, one successful product might not necessarily be successful for very long. And the reason why this happens is something that Mr. Bhaskar, which is MD and promoter of Kaveri Seeds, explains very well. What he says is typically a successful product enjoys 4 to 5 years of good run, wherein nature throws up challenges in form of pest and climate change, or both, right? Which makes the product no longer that resulting in that much, say, higher yields of pest control, right? Now, so now coming to the production chain, right? So once you get X variety of plant with Y variety of plant, the product you get is what is called a nucleus seed. So this is the first hybrid, right? And it is genetically pure. But you can't take this hybrid plant and start commercial manufacturing of it and marketing it to end farmer. The reason why this happens is because you can't scale this up, because every time you can't take two different varieties, do pollination of them in a farm and expect the same result, because you can't do it in a large scale, because typically what will happen is there's always this risk of contamination from different plants, different insects and all that. So typically what happens is in the first setting, what companies do is they create, they pollinate different varieties, and what they get is a nucleus seed. This is the first generation, this is genetically pure. Then they use this nucleus seed and multiply it through by planting them to what they call is a breeder seed, right? So breeder seed is basically your basic raw material for every seed company, right? Once you have a breeder seed, then that is multiplied again to get something what is called as foundation seed, which is the final raw material for every seed company, right? And using this foundation seeds is what seeds company grow hybrid plants, and the crops of those plants are then processed to what to create the final product, which is then sold to farmers, right? Now, typically the way the commercial production works is that, firstly, the commercial production is outsourced, right? So a seed company will do all the steps from R&D, nucleus seeds, breeder seeds to foundation seeds on its own labs, because these needs to be done on a small scale. And here you need to ensure a very controlled environment for that there's no contamination. So these things are done by the seed company on their own plant. But you can't do commercial production on your own land, because that requires a lot of land. So something like a Kaveri Seeds, they have like about 600 acres of land wherein they do all the R&D, nucleus seeds till foundation seeds. And then this foundation seeds are outsourced into contract farming, wherein seeds company will hire farmers with their lands, give them the foundation seeds, give them the expenditure that will cover all the production, and then take the final crop from them, which is the hybrid plant that grows, and process it and then sell it to in the commercial market, right? So something like a Kaveri Seeds has 600 acres of own land, but they have 1 lakh acres of contract land wherein they grow their final product, which is the hybrid plant, by giving them the foundation seeds. Now, the step of production itself has to be planned a lot in advance, because going back to what we discussed earlier, seeds are biological products. They don't grow in a day or a month, right? So for example, if a seed company has to sell want a certain inventory this year, they'll have to start production last year, right? By giving the foundation seeds to the contract farmers. And then itself for the seed company, they have to grow the foundation seeds themselves using the breeder seeds a year before. So it's like a 2-year lead cycle, right? So if you want X amount of inventory in say 2023, they have to start in 2021. In 2021, they'll use the breeder seed to create foundation seeds themselves. In 2022, they'll give the foundation seeds to contract farmers, which will then grow, and they'll take that produce and process it to create the commercial seeds which they will sell in 2023. Right. The third important thing that one needs to understand here is that demand has to be anticipated, because you can't create inventory in real time. So if you want to sell, say, 100 bags, you have to preempt that you want 100 bags and then plan that inventory in advance. Because since these are biological products, you can't work with a situation wherein you create 200 bags of inventory and then expect it to sell over the year. Because since these are biological products, this degrades, right? And then you have to take the risk of inventory loss, right? So 3 things. First, the production is outsourced. Second, it has to be planned in advance. And third, anticipating the demand is very important, because you carry the risk of inventory right now, right? This challenges are further amplified with the fact that, the sales and marketing window in a seed business is very small. So farmers don't buy seeds every year, like around the year. So they buy once every year, just before the sowing of the crop. That typically one season, and every season is basically 1 year in advance, right? So the sales window is very small. It's like 20 days, 30 days, like 1.5 month sales window. So a seed company has to market their products in this 1.5 window. If they miss it, the entire year is gone. And that is why seeds business, the entire business is done in a single quarter. If you see Kaveri Seeds, the entire business is done in Q1, when they get 99% of their revenues and 100% of the profits. Right. But the another challenge over here is that the end demand can vary quite a lot. Right. So if the climatic conditions which are not suitable, like the rains are not happening, then the demand for the end seeds might not be there. At the same time, if the end crop doesn't have the right pricing, so now since this year the crop prices are quite high along, right? So maybe the demand for seeds will increase, right? And that can work in reverse as well, right? So you have to plan in advance, right? And then the demand itself can be affected by a lot of factors, and that amplifies the risk of inventory write-off, right? So if I have to summarize just how the seed business dynamic works, the thing is that it's a very challenging business, right? Because the R&D phase takes quite a lot of time. It might be a 5 to 6 year timeline, right? And once you have a product, there's no guarantee that the product will be successful across the geographies because of different climatic conditions and soil conditions. At the same time, a successful product might not be successful for very long, right? Because the nature might throw different challenges and the hybrid qualities might no longer work. Then the production is something that one has to plan a lot in advance, right? And then the end demand itself is quite susceptible, right? So then you carry the risk of inventory itself. And lastly, since farming is a sensitive issue in India, there are a lot of government controls now then that happens. So like in the hybrid crop cotton segment, the end price of seeds itself is controlled, right? So now one would ask, given that the business is such challenging, what interests us here? So the thing that interests us here is the fact that in seeds business, there's a reasonable possibility that you can get a non-linear growth for a decently reasonable period of time of 3 to 5 years. And the reason why this happens is because of the traction that a successful product gets. So if a seed company has got a successful product, there's reason possibility that they can see non-linear growth in the business. And the reason why this non-linear growth happens is because of the way farmers buy seeds, right? So, there are a couple of factors that determines why farmers buy seeds. So, firstly, seeds is a very small cost in terms of overall cost of a farmer. So it might be 5 to 10% of the overall cost that goes into farmers, right? At the same time, seeds is primarily one of the key factors that will determine the end results, right? At the same time, seeds is probably one of the only things that is something that is on the hands of farmers. Right? They can't control the end pricing of crop. They can't control, the climatic conditions, the price and whatever. But what they can decide is what seeds they buy, right? So the primary thing that a farmer looks for and what seeds to buy is the performance, right? They are not sensitive to pricing, they're not sensitive to demand and whatever. There's what the sensitivity that determines what seeds farmers will buy is the performance that uh, the seeds will do, right? Because that is where the entire output of them depends on, right? And then the way farmers gets their sense of how seeds perform comes from a couple of factors. Firstly is their own experience in the last couple of years. So typically what happens is no farmer cultivates the entire land of single seed, right? So every farmer will typically cultivate the entire land with multiple seeds, wherein the dominant share would be taken by the seed, wherein the farmer is very comfortable in terms of seeing its performance for last couple of years. The remaining part goes to seeds, wherein things seeds that are new, wherein the dealer is recommending that this is working, or trying for new seeds, right? So there are a couple of things that works in determining the seeds performance. Firstly is their own experience. Secondly, comes from the experience that other farmers are getting, right? If your neighbor farmer has planted XYZ seeds and he has seen very good results this year, then that is the input in your consideration. Okay, that XYZ seed has done well for this farmer. Let me try it, right? The third is the dealer itself recommending. So most of the dealer, in order to push products of new companies or new products of the same company, they recommend farmer, okay, that try the XYZ seed and this is giving very good results. And lastly is the overall market hype. So while doing some groundwork, we spoke to one of the large distributors of seeds in Vidarbha region. So Vidarbha, where I stay, is basically one of the largest cotton producing region in Maharashtra. So the distributor told us, that every year, based on last couple of years of how a particular seeds is performing, there's a hype, like market में हवा बनती है particular seeds की, and that seed sells quite a lot, right? So it's a hype that creates that, XYZ seed is performing, then everybody rushes to buy one. So what happens is basically, if you have a product that is doing very well, then you see what is called a compounding traction, right? So in year one, if your seed performs well, there'll be a couple of farmers who have tried it, right? The next year, based on the results that they have seen, there would be more hype about that seed, and that traction continues to compound in such a way that there's a absolute nonlinear growth that you can see within just 2-3 years, right? So this makes seeds business one business where even a new company can start with zero market share and suddenly become the market leader. Because if a product is doing well, irrespective of whatever, like established players or whatever, if the product is doing well, it will continue to gain that compounding traction, and that will work. At the same time, no company can have a dominant market share, primarily because no product works for lifetime. So a good product might work for 5, 7, 10 years top, and no single product works across the geography. Right? Different states have different climatic condition, different soil condition, right? So this is one of the key aspects that one needs to understand, which is that the product, if you have a new product which is showing very good results, you can expect a compounding traction, right? So this is something that we have seen quite a lot. So there will be a couple of case studies that we cover. Firstly, this is something that we have seen in Kaveri Seeds back in 2007, 2014. Then we have seen this play out in Rasi Seeds as well from 2015. And we are seeing something play out in illegal STBT cotton seeds as well. So this phenomena of going for seeds that are doing well is so relevant that nowadays farmers are increasingly buying HTBT cotton, which is actually illegal to grow and produce, and and actually sells at twice the price what other normal seeds sells. But farmers just don't care. I mean, if they're getting performance, they're ready to buy it, irrespective of the price and irrespective of the legality of it.